We were talking earlier about this Huskers football roster, right? There are currently 103 people on scholarship.
Yeah.
The magic number is 85.
Yep.
Do you know the timetable on when they have to get down to 85?
No, I'd assume it's by the
Spring
time.
game,
No,
probably.
no,
No.
no. The spring. I mean, they're you're already in the spring semester, so that these. It's I imagine by the time you open up 2 days or whatever fall camp, so that stuff will take care of itself. I mean, where they're at. I mean, yeah, sure, it's a little high, but with the amount of activity that these coaches, this new coaching staff has had, and amount of turnover, as far as them going out and almost getting to what 39 new players if you count Betts and IGC coming back. That's what you expect, but it's 18 guys, and I'm assuming even more than that, we'll probably realize whether they realistically have a future here at Nebraska or really don't. And so the pressure now falls back on the coaching staff to fairly evaluate all the guys that are both new that are incoming, and then the guys that are presently on the roster, because regardless of what you say, this is not the time to sit back and think that we need 2 or 3 more years of misery. You got to have a fan base that's in wait and see mode. Um, Definitely aren't going to dummy down their expectations based on the paycheck of people. It's not fair, but that's just the way it is. It was the same way when I think that Scott and those guys came in and coming after Riley, and told her we need to revamp the weight program. We need to get bigger and stronger and get, and then we had to do a about face to where, a lot of our skill position guys were too small to last in the Big Ten. So you had to kind of do a mini reset as far as the type of guys that you recruited. So then that puts you behind the eight ball, and then COVID hits, and then next thing you know, you're right here. So, at the end of the day, people are going to expect you to win. And when, at this point in time, with the amount of turnover that's been had as far as the coaching changes in the Big Ten West, and finally getting over the hump and beating Iowa, right, wrong, or indifferent, your expectations are amplified now because you play Iowa. I don't know however many times they beat you in a row. I think every game but one of them was within one score. You get over the hump this year. A lot of the culture changes. A lot of the culture was changed during the season on the fly. Same with the expectations internally, and so now it just needs to be amplified. And I don't look at it as a rebuild, but again, I'm not the coach, so I look at it like more like a reshape or reform. That's the way I like to look at it. Now, obviously with a lot of things, and without a lot of people there, connected to the winning ways of Nebraska. So I guess in that way it might be a rebuild. But I think as far as on the field, when I look at the schedule, I don't see why not 6 wins, but maybe I look at it like a lot different. And maybe I have the belief that in this coaching staff, regardless of the age of some of the coaches or the experience of some of the coaches, that if you go and work hard and you continue to develop guys with the amount of support and time that you have, and then compare your opponents, that's where I come up with it. And maybe that's just the way I just operate. I know some people think football is super complex. Some of the things that goes on with football is complex. I think that's when the more complex you make football, besides coaching and teaching and developing football players. So all the additional complexity that you bring into the football program is why you suck and how you can suck for a very long time. I think the complexities, when it's kept separate than what you need to do to be the best football team, football staff, football support staff, athletic football department, if you can separate those two, that's why you see teams continue to be year in and year out solid programs. And then, like say if you want an example, which the famous words of Ike course, we can't measure ourselves against Iowa. So when Iowa has a super duper bad year, down year, and they win 7 games or whatever it is, and or barely miss or go to a bowl game, but don't go to the Big Ten championship when all they had to do was beat Nebraska. If that's your bottom, then you're working, then you're really cooking with some peanut oil. But when you separate, you have to separate it. And when you football, yeah, in a lot of ways can be complex because there's a lot of moving parts. That's the way it's always been. Now, you know, I could argue with you playing quarterback back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s is a lot harder than playing it right now. So I could argue that it's not that complex because you guys don't get the signals, or they don't have long plays. Everybody's looking to the sidelines. They don't have a lot of reads. It's usually one, with the RPO game, it's either, one read and go. Now that makes the defense a lot more complex because as a linebacker against an RPO type of team, you're not really thinking of trying to make plays. You're trying to get the offense, or the quarterback in this case, to do something that they don't want to do, right? So essentially, it comes down to fits. Now, it's complex because you have to change your mindset, but at the end of the day, it's no different than going against a power scheme where you have to fit correctly, or a gap scheme, or a trap scheme, or something like that. Now, that could be sort of complex, but there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. But I think when you have everything aligned, I think the complexities then generally dissipate or aren't as big as factor because the best football teams are able to be laser like focused on development, right? Both young guys, medium guys in their tenure, and the older guys, and then also developing the coaching staff, developing your culture. Then it just kind of goes in, and it just kind of just it's like you got a pot of, or a big bucket of water, and then it's continuously pouring into one, pouring into the other, pouring into the other, and then it just comes into a flood on the field. And so the faster that you can do that, then you'll just kind of be turnkey.
Does the coaching phrase, "get old and stay old," apply to Power Five football, to Nebraska football?
You wish, but Nebraska can't. Really, to be honest with you, when you really think back, again, you don't want to really, well, you don't want to hammer, you know, Scott in their tenure, but also let's be realistic. They were given the runway or the leeway to make this roster extremely young, right? And after I think their first year they did, it's like you stripped it, and a lot of guys left the program. So you went from, I guess, say, a on target type of, continuously to have some veterans with younger players, as you should be, right, to an extremely young team and a veteran conference that was starting to take off on a national level, and you were fighting an uphill battle from the get go. That's not Scott Frost and those guys' fault, because that's the plan that the AD at that time, Bill Moose, and that he was okay with it, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so that's why he had a 7-year contract, because that's what you're doing. You're essentially starting over and getting it to build it your way, the way you want it. Now, if he could forecast that COVID would hit, or the thunderstorm on the first game, I can guarantee you he would have went about it a different way. But you can't fault somebody with making the right decision at that point in time with the elements of that decision making that he had. You can't forecast COVID, because when you go to a very young team, it'd be like if I was a high school basketball coach and I was just coming in starting a program. And I was like, you know what, I got some really good eighth graders. So I'm gonna bump these guys up to JV and varsity, and we're gonna take our lumps, but by the time we're seniors, they're gonna be some dudes, right? So that's fine. Then COVID hits. So now we're not able to practice. I'm not able to develop those guys. They don't have any support, away from the program. And then now I got to still play some veteran guys that are ready made. And then now my job's on the line, because everybody's had a whole year or however long we were inside, essentially, to watch every YouTube, clip of me not doing well with a bunch of young guys. And if you want another example of it, is when Graham Mertz had his coming out party against all the freshmen, that were at Illinois. They got blitzed, right? He all of a sudden was supposed to be the first pick in the draft at Wisconsin. Well, 4 years later, Nebraska goes there in a must-win game and gets demolished, and then Brett Bielema comes in the next year, or that with that first year, Brett Bielema with Lovie Smith's guys that were young. It's the same freshman group that Nebraska went up there and put in work, but they were like a freshman all-star team, just made of Illinois players. So that's the way it goes. And so ideally, yeah, you'd like to have seniors, juniors, sophomores. Oh, I know it can start, but we're not there yet. We don't know who's going to play what.
that's what I was looking at the roster today. I made a statement for a podcast that you're going to need a roster card to watch the spring game because you're not going to identify more than half the players who are out there. Like you're going to have to look down and go, okay, who's this? Who is that?
Well, the best thing if you're a player, get out there to where people got to constantly check that card.
Well, yeah, it's a chance to be on display.
And if you have a number, if you're a guy that's already been on the roster, you better make sure that you ain't a guy that he was like, where is he at? Because if you're a where is he at guy, you're going to be like, well, where is he going? Because you're going to be in the portal.
He'll end up somewhere else. And that was a big, I mean, look, that was a big thing there, that even at worst case scenario, 18 players who are currently listed as scholarship athletes on the football program will not be a part of the program in 2 months. And that's a powerful thing. It's an unsteadiness.
That's when you think of it, it's a number wise, a low number recruiting class, right? Say you went heavy on say you went 25 or 26 one year, and you said, you know what, we're an older team. We only go. It's a recruiting class that's gone. Now that's what happens when you lose, when you don't have success. But what people don't understand is like when you hire this is what I'm telling you, man, like when you become a head coach, you are essentially the president of a football athletic department. There's a lot of people that depend on you to make the right decisions, because if you don't, there is a lot of collateral damage that happens and people's lives are changed.
One day we'll talk about that thinking, because if you're the CEO of a company and the president, you call the president to meeting and you're paying him 105% of the going rate for presidents of corporations, but he's only generating 25% effective production, he wouldn't be president for long. He wouldn't be president for long.
But when you don't do your job, there's people that actually are doing their job that no longer will have a job, and it has nothing to do with you. There's nothing, and you can't fault somebody. Like if I went into, I don't know who, let's say I took over, I don't know, Iowa State, right? Well, I mean, DP in Austin, you ready? You coming? Like if I went up, like, you know what I mean? If you're starting a new radio or some Dan Patrick show where he left, you're coming. Yeah, the guys who are there, you might be good, but these guys are coming. It's not really their fault, but then that's the sad part about the big time sports.
And who you ride with.